suddenly disappeared. This sixth mass extinction, which on a geologic timeline here of millions of years is occurring quickly, has really been going on for quite some time when we're talking about it in our frame of reference. Humans really wiped out a lot of species. They wiped out especially a lot of the large species. We know this from talking about buffalo that used to roam on the plains of the United States. But did you know that there used to be a giant sloth? This is a picture to scale of a sloth species that used to exist in North and South America. You can see the size compared to a human, but they were so large they were very easily hunted and quickly went extinct. We keep track of all these extinctions with something called the red list. Write that down in your notes. The red list is a list that is used in the United States to keep track of how many species are there, what has gone extinct, what is going through extirpation, where are we at with all of our different species. But back to biodiversity. Biodiversity is more than just extinction. We're worried about more than just losing species. What's more concerning to us is the decline in populations that we see and the change in distribution of many of the organisms that we see, because this will change the biodiversity in areas. Okay, biodiversity, we keep that red list of organisms, that danger list of organisms, but on that red list, we measure it according to what's called the Living Planet Index. The Living Planet Index. This is actually maintained by the UN, and it gives us a way to measure how much the populations are declining, how much the distribution is changing, and it gives us a way to measure it over the whole planet. Now, what is contributing to this biodiversity loss? There's 5 different causes listed here. 4 of these causes are going to be things that happen in a specific time and in a specific place. The climate change, this final one, is more of a global impact. But let's look through these. These are pretty simple causes. Habitat loss. Habitat loss causes loss of biodiversity. Pretty much all human activities cause habitat loss. Farming, grazing, clear-cutting forests, building dams, urbanization, all of these things cause habitat loss. When we think of habitat loss, it's very rare for us to go in and completely demolish an entire area. What typically happens more is what's called habitat fragmentation. So, for example, humans would not go in and cut down every single tree in every single rainforest in the Amazon, but they go in and destroy small areas at a time. And we'll come back to this area of fragmentation in chapter 12 and talk more about it and give some more terms to it. But just writing down right now that we don't go in typically and destroy an entire area. We destroy little patches of it at a time. But that still has a big impact on the biodiversity of the organisms living in those habitats. Another cause of biodiversity loss is pollution. Pollution from farming, pollution from industrialization, pollution from our homes. Pollution can get into habitats and can destroy the number of organisms or destroy organism populations completely. Pollution's probably the least concerning of all these problems. And the reason why is because even though pollution can be really, really severe, if the habitat is lost or if an invasive species comes in and takes over, pollution is kind of the least of the worries for these species. At least species have a chance to try to survive in a polluted environment, but if the environment's completely gone, that's a bigger problem. So pollution is generally considered to be the least concerning problem here. Overharvesting, our hunting practices, is a large cause of loss of biodiversity. Not surprisingly, the hunting is causing a decrease in the case-selected species. Humans are case-selected. Any large mammal is typically case-selected, so it's the things that we go out and hunt. Invasive species have caused a loss of biodiversity. We looked back in the last chapter, in chapter 10, at these invasive species that humans kind of have transported into new habitats. And because those invasive species don't have limiting factors, they spread really quickly in ecosystems and outcompete the native populations. So habitat loss, pollution, overharvesting, and invasive species, these are all in one place at one time. climate change is more of a global impact that's happening in general. Climate change can cause droughts, extreme weather, changes in temperature, and can really impact globally the number of organisms. So this may be a little bit of a larger problem. If you think about it, climate change could change the prey that an organism could be eating. It can change the predators that the organism is exposed to. For sedentary species like trees cannot pull up their roots and walk to a new habitat. If the climate's changing, the trees may not be able to move towards the poles quickly enough. The movement of a tree population is very, very slow. As the tree scatters its seeds, the seeds that survive grow into new trees. And so, sure, if climate change happened very slowly, tree populations could relocate. But if climate change happens quickly, those slow-moving species won't be able to get towards the poles fast enough. In general, there's no way to, at this point, say how much impact climate change will have because we don't know how much the climate will change. But what we can say is this. If the temperature changes between 1.5 and 2.5 degrees Celsius, which is what is predicted, if that changes, what that's going to equal is about a 20 to 30% loss in biodiversity on the whole planet. So this is definitely going to be a larger issue than some of the smaller things that happen in one place at one time. So we're losing biodiversity. Why do we need biodiversity? Biodiversity provides us with a whole list of things. It provides us with ecosystem services, ecosystem functions, food security, drugs and medicine, economic benefits, biophilia, and we are ethically obligated to protect some of these species. Let's go through this list. Let's start with ecosystem services. Take a second, let's pause the video and take a second to make a list of at least 10 ecosystem services on the next slide. The next slide is left blank for you. You can work with a partner, but take a second here, pause the video, and try to come up with 10 ecosystem services. Okay, so you should have your list of your 10 ecosystem services. Go ahead and look through your list. I'm going to read some off for you so you can make sure you're on the right page and you're kind of doing the right thing. One that you should have is that ecosystems provide food, they provide fuel, they provide shelter. Ecosystems purify the air. Ecosystems purify the water. Ecosystems detoxify and decompose waste. Ecosystems can stabilize our climate. They can moderate floods. They can cycle nutrients. They can renew the soil. Ecosystems can pollinate plants and crops. They can control pests. They can maintain genetic diversity. And they provide a cultural or aesthetic benefit to humans. Remember, this is something you should have in your back pocket for any AP test. You should have just a list of ecosystem services that you can use because it's going to come up a lot on the free response questions. Okay, so ecosystem services will be lost if we lose biodiversity. We have to protect the ecosystems. Ecosystem functioning can be lost. So ecosystem functioning is referring to the idea that biodiversity helps stabilize the population. It helps the population have resilience. So if there is any kind of disturbance, high biodiversity will allow the populations and the ecosystem to remain steady and to recover from any changes. So stability is the idea that it can just remain the same. And resilience is the idea that if it does change, it can recover. Okay, two key ideas here with this stability and resistance are two things we've talked about already this year: keystone species and ecosystem engineers. Remember, keystone species are high-level predators within an ecosystem that can help maintain the stability, the functioning of that ecosystem. We've talked about examples with sea otters, where when the sea otters are removed from that aquatic ecosystem, the entire ecosystem collapses. Those keystone species are typically high level predators at large mammals. Ecosystem engineers, the organisms that build an ecosystem, carpenter ants, beavers, anything that goes in and manipulates the ecosystem. These are also providing ecosystem function, creating the stability and the resilience for that ecosystem. So if we lose biodiversity, we would lose those keystone species. We would lose those ecosystem engineers. Biodiversity gives us food security. There are 7,000 different plants and animals on this planet that we could be using for food. Losing biodiversity decreases those food sources. Drugs and medicine. If we lose biodiversity, we lose the ability to go out and find new drugs. Within the last 5 years, there have been new drugs found, most often in areas of high biodiversity like the rainforest. But we have found anti-cancer drugs, cardiac stimulants, and inflammation reducers in newly discovered species just within the last 5 to 10 years. If we lose biodiversity, we lose the economic benefits of that ecotourism and recreation. So you're losing economically. There's a great example you can use on a test. So here we have social impacts, we have economic impacts, we have political impacts. Biophilia. Biophilia is a term, if you need a definition, it's the instinctive love of nature that humans have. We have this picture over here, this nice calming picture of the sun setting over a lake. Humans are instinctively drawn to this. It calms us down. If we lose biodiversity, we may lose that biophilia. We may lose that connection to nature. And finally, humans have this role. We've taken on this role where we kind of have an ethical obligation to other species. That we not only do we need biodiversity for all of these reasons, but perhaps it's just our obligation to protect these species. Now, this is debated. Not everyone's going to agree with this. But when you look at this list, here's a great essay question for a test. You have social reasons here that we need to protect biodiversity. You have ethical reasons here why we need biodiversity. You have political reasons here. You have environmental reasons. You have economic reasons. So all sorts of different reasons why we need to protect biodiversity. Obviously, we've already done some damage to our ecosystem, but what has come from that is this push for conservation biology. Conservation biology, let's define this here. Conservation biology is understanding what we need to do to restore biodiversity. Understanding what we need to do to restore biodiversity. And since biodiversity is studied at multiple levels, genetic, population, species, ecosystem, conservation biology can be studied at these